For more than 2 decades, Norm Abram opened the doors of his workshop and invited millions of viewers inside, never raising his voice, never chasing drama, just quietly teaching people how to build something real with their own hands. Week after week, his calm presence turned complicated woodworking projects into something that felt possible, even for beginners. Then one day, without warning, the doors closed and the show simply disappeared. No farewell episode, no explanation on screen, just silence. And ever since, fans have been asking the same question about Norm Abram and the workshop that shaped a generation. A show that never felt like television. When the new Yankee workshop first aired on PBS in the late 1980s, it arrived without the usual signals that told viewers they were watching television. There were no countdown clocks, no manufactured pressure, no voiceovers pushing urgency. Instead, there was Norm Abram, standing in a plainly lit workshop, speaking softly and deliberately, as if the camera wasn't there at all. He didn't perform for viewers, he spoke with them. He explained why a measurement mattered before making the cut, why wood reacted to humidity, why patience was not optional but essential. From the very beginning, the show rejected spectacle. What it offered was trust. That trust shaped everything. The program didn't move quickly, and it didn't apologize for that. Each episode unfolded at the pace of real work, not edited drama. Norm walked viewers through the entire process: planning, layout, cutting, fitting, assembly, and finishing, without skipping steps or hiding complexity. If a technique required precision, he explained it until it made sense. If a process carried risk, he slowed down and emphasized safety. Protective glasses were not a suggestion, they were part of the ethic. In this workshop, care mattered as much as outcome. More than anything, the show gave people permission to slow their own lives down. As entertainment elsewhere grew louder and more aggressive, Norm's workshop felt insulated from that noise. The calm repetition of methodical work became almost meditative. Viewers didn't feel rushed to absorb information. They felt invited. Mistakes were not sensationalized or used as hooks. They were anticipated, explained, and prevented through preparation. The message was consistent and quietly radical. Good work comes from thinking ahead. Over time, the new Yankee workshop became a constant presence in American homes. It wasn't something people binge-watched or talked about the next morning at work. It was something they returned to. Furniture built on the show wasn't trendy or decorative for the sake of it. It was meant to last. Chairs were built to be sat in for decades. Cabinets were designed to outlive the room they were placed in. That philosophy resonated deeply with viewers who were tired of disposable culture, even if they couldn't articulate it at the time. As seasons passed, the influence of the show spread quietly. Some viewers picked up tools for the first time. Others refined skills they already had. Many never built a thing, yet absorbed the values embedded in the work: discipline, patience, respect for materials, and pride without ego. Norm completed hundreds of projects on camera, and each one reinforced the same truth: shortcuts always reveal themselves in the end. From the outside, there was no sign of decline. The audience remained loyal. Support never wavered. The workshop functioned as it always had, which is why, when it ended without warning, the silence felt so profound, like a steady voice suddenly gone mid-sentence. The weight behind the calm voice. To understand why the workshop doors eventually closed, you have to understand what it actually took for Norm Abram to stand there so calmly every week. On screen, everything looked measured and effortless, as if each project unfolded naturally from start to finish. But that calm was the result of an enormous amount of unseen labor. The new Yankee workshop was never a casual shoot. Every episode began long before the cameras were turned on, with Norm alone at the drafting table, working through designs, calculating dimensions, and anticipating problems that viewers would never notice because they had already been solved. Norm wasn't given a script or a set of prefabricated plans. He created the projects from the ground up. He selected materials, tested joinery, adjusted proportions, and often built portions of a project in advance just to make sure the process could be explained clearly on camera. If something didn't translate well for a home woodworker, it was reworked. If a step felt unsafe or confusing, it was redesigned. That level of preparation took time, weeks for a single build, and it demanded total focus. By the time viewers saw Norm make a clean cut or fit a joint perfectly, that moment had already been rehearsed through experience, not performance. At the same time, the new Yankee workshop was only one half of Norm's professional life. He was still deeply committed to This Old House, a show that required constant travel, on-location problem-solving, and long days dealing with real construction challenges under public scrutiny. Unlike many television hosts, Norm didn't arrive after the hard work was done. He was there for the framing, the corrections, the unexpected issues that come with old buildings and tight timelines. He wasn't acting the role of a carpenter, he was being one. Season after season, that physical reality began to assert itself. Carpentry is demanding work even without cameras. Add deadlines, multiple takes, and the expectation of precision, and the strain compounds quickly. Lifting heavy materials, standing for hours, repeating tasks to get them right for viewers, none of it is gentle on the body. What looked calm on screen required endurance off screen, and that endurance has limits. As the years passed, those limits became harder to ignore. The pace that once felt sustainable began to feel relentless. Filming schedules collided with family obligations. Personal projects that mattered to Norm had to be postponed or set aside. The workshop, once a place of focus and satisfaction, became another obligation competing for finite time and energy. Gradually, Norm spent less time there, not because his passion had faded, but because something had to give. Quiet speculation followed. Some assumed he was losing interest. Others framed it as burnout. Those explanations were too simple. The truth was more grounded and more difficult. Norm had built his reputation on doing things the right way, without shortcuts, without compromise. Maintaining two demanding television roles while holding himself to those standards was no longer realistic. Continuing would have required lowering expectations, simplifying projects, or delegating the work that had always defined his hands-on approach. That was a line Norm Abram was unwilling to cross. If he couldn't give the workshop his full attention, mentally, physically, and ethically, then continuing felt dishonest. The internal conflict between devotion to craft and the reality of time and energy didn't erupt into drama. It settled quietly into certainty. And that certainty would soon lead to a decision that felt sudden to viewers, but had been building slowly, season after season, behind the calm voice they had trusted for so long. The rumors that never fit the truth. When the new Yankee workshop stopped producing new episodes, the absence of an explanation created a vacuum, and into that silence rushed speculation. Some assumed the audience had moved on, that woodworking no longer held the same appeal in a world leaning toward faster, flashier entertainment. Others claimed funding had dried up, or that public television was quietly trimming programs that felt too traditional. None of those theories survived close inspection, but they spread anyway, because viewers were searching for a reason that made sense. The facts told a different story. Ratings had not collapsed. The show still had a loyal, engaged audience that followed Norm season after season. Underwriters remained committed. From a business standpoint, there was no emergency forcing the workshop to shut its doors. If anything, the show was stable in a way few long-running programs ever achieve. That stability only deepened the confusion when production stopped. Behind the scenes, a more uncomfortable question began to circulate. Could the show continue without Norm Abram? For producers, this was not a casual discussion. Norm wasn't a presenter who could be swapped out with another face. He was the voice, the authority, and the trust behind every project. Viewers didn't tune in for spectacle. They tuned in because they believed him. The idea of replacing Norm sparked immediate resistance, even before it became public. As word leaked that a replacement might be considered, the reaction was swift. Fans pushed back hard. Letters came in. Online discussions turned defensive. The message was clear and consistent. The new Yankee Workshop without Norm Abram was not the same show. Any new host would be measured against him, and that comparison would be impossible to win. Producers understood the risk. Continuing the show without its foundation would damage not only the program's credibility, but the legacy it had built over decades. At the same time, rumors of backstage conflict began to surface, as they often do when a long-running series ends quietly. Some claimed creative disagreements. Others hinted at personal disputes. These stories didn't align with reality. There was no dramatic fallout, no argument that pushed Norm out the door. In fact, the opposite was true. The decision to stop was made with respect, restraint, and an understanding that forcing the show to continue would betray everything it stood for. By the time these rumors reached full volume, the real decision had already been made. The workshop didn't end because it failed. It ended because the people behind it refused to let it become something lesser. Walking away while it still meant something. For Norm Abram, the hardest part of ending the new Yankee Workshop was not walking away from television. It was walking away from a routine that had defined his life for decades. The workshop was not just a set. It was a space built with his own hands, shaped around his habits, his tools, and his way of thinking. Every bench, every cabinet, every carefully placed machine reflected a system he trusted. Letting go of that rhythm meant letting go of a version of himself that had existed for more than 20 years. By the time the show reached its final seasons, Norm was no longer interested in proving anything. He had already done what he set out to do. He had shown that woodworking could be taught patiently, without ego. He had proven that viewers didn't need drama to stay engaged, only clarity and honesty. More than 200 projects later, repeating the process began to feel less like growth and more like obligation. Norm understood that staying too long can quietly erode the standards you once protected. There was also the matter of time, real time, not television time. Years spent filming meant years spent away from family, away from private work, away from the slower pace he encouraged others to embrace. Ironically, the man who taught millions to measure carefully and avoid rushing had been living on a relentless production schedule himself. Continuing would have required compromises, and compromise was never part of his philosophy. What made the decision more painful for viewers was how little it was announced. There was no episode framed as a goodbye, no final project designed as a tribute. The show simply stopped. That silence wasn't an oversight. It reflected Norm's personality. He didn't believe craftsmanship needed ceremony. To him, the work spoke for itself. But for the audience, the lack of closure felt like a door closing mid-sentence. Still, the decision was firm. Norm chose to leave while the workshop still represented what he believed in. He refused to let fatigue turn precision into routine or teaching into repetition. In doing so, he protected the integrity of everything the show had built. The ending hurt precisely because it was honest. And that honesty would shape how the show's absence was felt long after the cameras stopped rolling. After the doors closed, the questions remained. When the workshop doors closed for the last time on television, the new Yankee Workshop didn't fade out gracefully. It vanished. For years after production ended, fans searched for answers in reruns, archived episodes, and scattered interviews, trying to understand how something so steady could simply stop. Unlike shows that end amid controversy or collapse, this one left behind only absence, and absence has a way of growing heavier with time. For a while, the series lived on quietly through official platforms. Viewers could still access episodes and project plans online, revisiting builds they remembered by heart or discovering details they had missed the first time. The workshop felt preserved, like a museum frozen in motion. Then, without much warning, even that access disappeared. Licensing agreements expired, and suddenly decades of work became difficult to find. For many fans, it felt like losing the show all over again. That disappearance sparked a deeper realization. The program hadn't just taught people how to build furniture. It had shaped how they thought about work, patience, and pride in craft. Parents had watched it with their children. Retirees had rediscovered purpose through it. Young viewers who never picked up a chisel still absorbed its values. Preparation matters, shortcuts cost more in the end, and skill is earned through repetition and care. The show's absence left a cultural gap that no replacement ever filled. Then, years later, something unexpected happened. The workshop resurfaced, not on public television, but online. Episodes began appearing again, accessible to anyone willing to search. A new generation found Norm Abram not through scheduled programming, but through algorithms and recommendations. Stripped of its original context, the show somehow felt even more timeless. The absence of trends, the lack of flash, the quiet authority of Norm's teaching, all of it stood out even more in a digital world built on speed. What became clear was this: the show had ended, but its purpose had not. The workshop remained intact. The tools stayed where they were. And the lessons, once taught, didn't disappear just because the cameras stopped. So maybe the real reason the new Yankee workshop ended isn't something dramatic or scandalous at all. Maybe it ended because Norm Abram understood when to stop, before the work lost its meaning. Do you think shows like this could ever exist again in today's television world? Or was this truly the end of a kind of craftsmanship we won't see twice? Let me know what you think, and if this workshop meant something to you, don't forget to share your story below.